How's it going, people of the JSA? Welcome back. We're here with the first review of Stargirl Season 3, Episode 1, titled The Murder. In this breakdown, not only are we going to recap, as we usually do in a review later on, we'll review and, go over what I thought of the episode, but also we are going to get in some theories, because one of my most anticipated things about Stargirl Season 3 was the theme about finding out who this murderer is. And in this episode, there are definitely seeds planted. I'm sure some misdirects and whatnot. So looking forward to see you guys contribute your theories down in the comments below. But let's now first, of course, get into the events of the episode. As always, guys, would appreciate you hitting that like button. It just takes 2 seconds, helps me grow the channel, grow the video organically, and breach that freaking algorithm that the ISA put up there. And also, if you're brand new to the channel, would appreciate it if you subscribe, because we'll be posting these every week along with other content on the channel that I'm sure you would enjoy. So right at the beginning, we have a little nice intro back into Blue Valley, if you will, and actually, there was a narration first. I have a couple of ideas about this. So it says a tale of trust, a tale of heartache, and a tale of murder. Now, the latter, obviously, murder being murder victims, the first one in this episode being Gambler. Now, as for a tale of heartache, this could obviously mean multiple things, but let's just jump right to it. We do know that there's going to be a bit of a rekindling, or finally the progression of the romance, if you will, between Courtney and Cameron Markent, Icicle Jr. I think, and I hope I'm wrong because I don't want it to be mega predictable. Not that predictability is always a bad thing as long as the execution of the story is good, but if Jordan eventually, not Cameron, wait, no, Jordan was the dad. Cameron finds out that Stargirl, maybe had something to do with her father's death. He could go down the route of villainy, and that could entail the heartache between those two. And a tale of trust, I suppose, comes down to a character we already know. Now, Sylvester Pemberton has come back from the dead. Things are a bit ambiguous this episode. And can he really be trusted? That is the question. I know they're presenting it that way. I don't want to go too ahead of myself with being like, isn't that the obvious choice? Starman comes back, Starman's doing shady things. Well, they could make it obvious that that is the first choice to go to so that you think it isn't obvious, but then it really is obvious. I'm not really sure. Time will tell. We had frickin' Jakeem Thunder and the Thunderbolt. I think that's all we saw of those two this episode on the paper round or paper route. The Shade is settled down in Blue Valley now. He actually got a paper delivered to him by Jakeem. Now, while Courtney, Pat, and the family have been away on a little bit of a vacation, we've had Starman staying at the home. He's repaired everything, trying to earn his keep, if you will, and he even has made a display case for Cosmo right next to his bed. Now, the way the episode gives the impression across initially is that I knew that he wasn't like mega okay with the fact that he has to let the staff go, but he at least, or the episode at least, gets across that the mantle has been passed on and he's kind of ready to move forward. But obviously that flips on its head a little bit later. Now, it was in this conversation with Courtney at the beginning of the episode where we get some kind of talk about how Starman came back. He says he's still trying to figure it out, and did I mention that I woke up in my own coffin? He was screaming. I mean, anyone would. Imagine you have to breach through the coffin, breach through the earth. I still want to know how, though. I mean, if you want to get nitpicky, if you're buried 6 feet under, I don't know how you have the strength to, go through all that dirt and all that weight on top of you. I want to know how he came to the conclusion of, and I know he says he doesn't understand it, but he said, but I think when you formed the bond with Cosmo over there, it woke the bond I have with him too. And he somewhat attributes that to him coming back. It just seems like such a shot in the dark for me. But maybe that's the very point, right? But either way, when the Whitmores have been away with Pat, he's been actually using the staff. There's a bit of a foreshadowing for him revealing later on that he really doesn't want to stop being Starman entirely. And that's because there was newspaper reports on the kitchen countertop of unexplained light foiling a pizza robbery, a lost scout troop found thanks to a strange shooting star. So that's obviously Sylvester flying away. More or less at the beginning of this episode, we get this setup of the insecurity, or apprehension more accurately, that Courtney's feeling about him not being truly honest about wanting the staff. Pat is just encouraging the fact that Sylvester is here and just saying that he can teach you good things, of which, by the way, we're going to go into the promo briefly for next episode at the end of this episode, which teases some training from Starman. Also, this season being titled Frenemies, we have exactly that set up next. We have the Crocs waving from across the street, but also just this larger commentary on how Courtney says that we can help the bad guys break good. So hence, yeah, like frenemies, the Shade is kind of in the club. Grundy, at least I guess Rick is trying to bring him back, of which we saw in that intro montage. He's got his new hourglass. We didn't really get any direct address to this in the conversation, but it's clearly operational. At the moment, I think he's kind of like half an hour man. He clearly got frustrated and threw the spade away at the beginning there, because I think it ended around the half an hour mark or the 33-minute mark, so not quite up to the hourglass. So when he's out of the JSA a little bit later, about to stop those criminals before Artemis got involved, I guess he can only be powered for half an hour. But this is when we have the Gambler arrive, who also wants to make amends. Now, initially, it does feel like, okay, there's some ulterior thing going on here. The Gambler can't be trusted, right? And also, even Courtney and Pat were like, you don't have that same opportunity afforded to you like the Crocs necessarily, because while we all united to fight Eclipso, you were running away. So, like, at the end of the day, we don't really know you as much as the others. Even then, we don't fully trust the Crocs, because that was another thing this episode about locking a door, unlocking a door. Oh, lo and behold, frickin' Crusher, lets himself in at 5:30 in the morning. It turns out that the Gambler was genuine this episode, and he puts his main reason for wanting to make amends, maybe start to make a bit of a change, is because he found out that he has a daughter who was put up for adoption, and he's been trying to search for it ever since. Now, I am probably getting too far ahead of myself here, but we do know Mr. Bones was teased at the end of season 2. We know that Green Lantern in the show, the current one, Jade, traced back her brother Todd to staying in that location and where Mr. Bones is actually operating out of, possibly even experimenting on kids, who knows, with regards to the whole Infinity Inc. stuff. Who knows where that could go this season, but I am wondering, it did first crossed my mind, what if, Mr. Bones has got the Gambler's daughter, but again, such a shot in the dark there. I just thought, what if she's in that house where various kids were staying, like Todd did before he disappeared to somewhere else, of which I assume we might pick up again this season, which is when we get that little tease of the murderer. Not that necessarily at the time we would have connected all of the dots, but this scene kind of zoomed out into a little CCTV screen, going blank, and it clearly meant to show that someone is watching them, of which we got full clarity on at the end. Not that the Gambler could warn anyone about it. I wish he just picked up his phone, just be like, hey, Pat, I said I was going to be a good man. By the way, you might want to know about this. But he got too creeped out and then ended up getting himself killed, of course. But this was a nice way to foreshadow what we would eventually find out later on. Then we pick up with the Shade in the diner. Long story short here, the Gambler tried to convince him that he wants to make amends, put their past behind them, the past disagreements. But the thing I want to talk about is, after the Shade warned him to go away, turned his eyes black, used some of his powers, it clearly showed that his powers are on the fritz. So he was wiping some of his power away, almost as if it was like sleepy eyes, and he got some of it on his finger, and it was like sparking. So his powers are on the fritz, to put it in a plain way. And this comes to a little bit of a theory of mine as to why he could be one of the suspects, even though I don't necessarily think that the murderer is the Shade, because I guess some people might say, oh yeah, but wouldn't it be obvious because they framed the Shade as being the big bad of season 2, even though it was Eclipso? He is a contender, because for all we know, to get to the point here, if his powers are on the fritz, he might not even know himself that he might be going out and killing people there. Of course, I don't have much more explanation behind that. Why would his powers do that? But it's meant to, I guess, make you think, what is going on there? But also, I do want to mention he was struggling with his powers in the latter of season 2, so this could just simply be a repercussion of what he's been dealing with ever since he was, struggling to teleport and use his powers when he was wounded and whatnot. Meanwhile, in the high school, we visit some other JSA members all together, actually. Yolanda is saying, why are you trusting these people? Especially coming down hard on Cindy, which I don't blame her about. Rick then joins the table. He's had no luck with Grundy. He says that he's tried burying him everywhere where the Shade has told him to, in a clear field, under a full moon, between 2 oak trees. Whatever he says, but nothing happens. Then we have Cindy join the table. She's kind of acting a very passive-aggressive-y kind of self. She is trying to be better, I guess, but there's some bad blood between her and Yolanda. Also, Rick announces that, only 2 of us voted for these new members of the JSA. We have Artemis slam down on the table saying, "Go team." So it just doesn't look great to them, saying, like, can anyone just join the JSA now? Like, literally anyone. Then, at the pit stop, we have Starman hanging out with Pat. We can't forget that Starman died, like, not decades and decades and decades ago, but still in a time where he needs to kind of be reintegrated back. So seeing a robot like this, it is actually really impressing him, and he is acting a bit different now. Him saying sorry isn't something Starman would have done before, as Pat mentions later on in the episode, but also just saying how well he's done. Pat almost like doesn't seem to recognize him in a way there. Not that I'm saying that the episode is conducting Starman Sylvester here in a way that is so obviously different. He is, for all intents and purposes, Sylvester, but he has come back with almost like this new perspective. And I am very interested in this, and I do think we're going to see a bit of him bleed through. For example, in the flashbacks, he was a bit more of a dick back then, and we are going to see, and I remember things teased in the main trailer, like a yelling match between him and Pat, and I really don't think he's remotely as cool as he put off about how they're okay with the shade now, the Crocs. I know he says, I'm not saying Courtney's wrong, but he has issues with that, which, by the way, guys, also makes Sylvester, yes, I know, a suspect. We can't rule him out. I know that's an obvious choice, and this is why I love murder themes in shows, because everyone that is predictable is still on the board. And that's what I like about this, because even when making these breakdown videos, I'm like, oh, it could be Starman, Oh, we had someone watching the Gamblers trailer at a certain point, and it zoomed out to the shoulder. Could that be Starman's leather jacket? But maybe not. Maybe he doesn't even realize that he's murdering people in the same way that I proposed with the Shade. Him coming back, but I don't know. But the fact is, later on, he called them predators. What if he's got to the point of where he's so disgusted, he's murdering them? But again, too predictable, isn't it? I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself there. It was fun to see them fly out in the sky, especially with Pat being a bit more on the equal ground, though. Even though later, jumping ahead again, he calls him a sidekick. I really think Pat should have put his foot down there saying, like, no, like, I'm my own dude now. Like, so screw you, Sylvester. Now, meanwhile, the Gambler's in his trailer looking at a photo of his daughter, searching for her on his laptop, and he uncovers that gun, he throws it in the bin eventually, but before that, I think he hears, or maybe he does it first, he hears a car, but no one is there, but this is when you get that zoom out moment where someone is standing there. Now, immediately made me think, again, I'm not having any conviction in any theory here because we just don't know, but what if it's Sylvester again? Just posing that because he arrived to town in a set of wheels, and it could be his car that made that noise. Again, he might want to keep tabs on old ISA members. What you have to remember here as to why I think the person who has the most motive here, even though it might not be this person because it's too obvious almost, but Starman has been brought back from the dead from a literal time where his last memory before dying was that the ISA, he was in a battle with them, and his friends, or some of them, literally died in that battle when the JSA fell. That's his last memory. So he's just come back to life, and he might be so committed and have such conviction to keep an eye on him that maybe he's even been pushed to the point of murdering. Again, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but the person keeping tabs could very well be Sylvester, but then why would he set up CCTV at Courtney's house? Now, Sylvester and Pat return home, and it's a little bit awkward because you took the staff without telling me. This is when Courtney goes downstairs and talks to Sylvester. He admits that he's been lying to her and that he did come back for the stuff, because to him, he thought that maybe Pat had just been storing it, which he did before it chose Courtney. But he essentially said that the staff was his life. He has no parents anymore. They weren't the greatest parents. His sister died. He has no wife, no family, no kids. So all he had was Starman. But at the same time, he's not a dick and he wouldn't take the staff away from Courtney. So I think at this point he is trying to come to terms with that. But that's when Courtney proposed that they could do a tag team of Starman and Stargirl. When she's at school, he can have the staff, and when she isn't, she can have it. But I do think that this could lead to him maybe reverting to a bit of his old ways. Not that obviously he was ever a villain, but just falling in love with being Starman even more. And the more he does it, maybe the more he really might not want to give it back. That could create some drama there. Maybe I'm way off with that. But either way, we know we're getting some training next episode, and in this moment, that was proposed. But it was in this moment that Beth contacted Courtney because they've got some trouble. This is where we see that the Gambler's old gang, the No Limit gang, is, mugging this civilian, I believe, doing a truck robbery or something. And they're thinking, oh, well, see, this guy who came to say that he had changed or wanted to change hasn't changed. But as we know, he literally was trying to, and they had no connection. And Beth did make that point, and she even emphasized it later when they were going to the Gambler's truck at the end of the episode, or the trailer, should I say, that we don't know if it is him. Like, there is no connection. I want to put that out there, but people like Yolanda and Rick are just like, well, it doesn't matter. Like, we'll wreck him. But Artemis just comes in. She says, go JSA, single-handedly takes them all out. So there was no bigger fight scene in episode 1 other than that. But Artemis, it looks like we are going to be working with Artemis a little bit more in the future episodes. But then, end of episode, we cut back to the Gambler. He's writing that letter to his daughter. He's even letting a tear out. And as soon as I saw this scene, I was like, yep, he's going to die. He's literally going to die. And as he puts the letter in his blazer, that is when his laptop goes crazy. He says an unidentified feed has been discovered, and there's cameras everywhere. And of course, the Gambler's trailer. Now, that kind of surveillance makes me feel like it is Mr. Bones, and this could actually have nothing to do with the murderer. Like, they could be making, again, as I said earlier, us think that this is connected, but the murder is a separate thing. But again, they could be connected. So as a result, he's like, oh shit, gets the gun back out from the bin. Good thing he didn't throw out the trash. And he goes outside. We see the perspective from the CCTV feed. He's approaching the camera, and then he looks to his side, and then some kind of monstery-esque noise happens. And, well, he doesn't die there and then, because we cut to the JSA heading to that trailer anyway, because they wanted to ask the Gambler about all of this. And that is when we hear a gunshot. It's going to be interesting to see how this logistically works between that space. I'm guessing the Gambler had a bit of a 1-2 with whoever this murderer is, because that place looked wrecked. But of course, Cindy was standing or kneeling beside the body, holding the gun that was still literally smoking. So I'm guessing we might get a flashback, if you want to call it that, to what actually happened when Cindy arrived. I believe that she didn't do it, but I don't know why the gun went off. If Cindy was already there, I'm guessing she didn't see the murderer. Otherwise, she would say to them, oh, there was a murderer here. I know who it is, or at least what they looked like. So I don't think the gun would have gone off firing at the murderer as they ran away. So I want to know why that gunshot went off. I mean, it's possible that it could have just been done for a bit of dramatic effect, even though it might not make much sense, but we have to wait until the next episode, of course. So that was the episode, guys, and I enjoyed myself. I thought it was a decent start to the season. It set up everything they needed to do, coming back to Blue Valley, setting up the situation with Starman. There are some, I guess, feelings of unbelievable-esque dialogue with regards to surely Starman and Stargirl. Courtney would have had that conversation about, about that, with regards to coming back a lot sooner, like at the end of season 2 with Eclipso when they went back to the house. So having that conversation here didn't feel so believable kind of thing, even though he is trying to still work it out. Just felt like they would have had that a bit sooner. But overall, I felt like it set up the murder mystery theme very well. You've got a lot of plot ideas there that have got the audience intrigued, because I feel like if I'm feeling this way, I'm not obviously saying everyone's going to feel this way, but I feel like this episode would have gone down quite well with a lot of viewers. We know, if you've been a fan already, that other things are coming into it, like Mr. Bones, so it makes you think, could he have already been involved in this episode without us realizing it, such as the CCTV? We just don't know. The Shade's powers are on the fritz. What's going on there? There's definitely more to Starman. Not that they teased us too much with that. And yeah, it's a good start to season 3. Now, of course, before we briefly get on to the promo, I would love to know your thoughts as to, obviously, what did you think of this first episode of season 3? But also, of course, I have to ask it, who do you think the murderer is? Way too early to ask, I know, but it's a part of the fun. Do you think there's any candidates already? Obviously, at the moment, I should rephrase it to just suspects. Looking forward to read all of your thoughts down in the comments, but let's go on to the teaser for next week's episode very briefly. And we start off with the gang talking about the suspects. A man is dead and there's a killer out there. Find the laptop, find the killer. So when they go, I assume, into the Gambler's trailer, the laptop must be missing, because I guess whoever the murderer is took it because he was worried that since the Gambler's a bit of a tech expert, he clearly found out a link to the CCTV. So I guess they're thinking, well, a gambler always has a laptop, so if he doesn't have a laptop, where is his laptop? So they want to find it. I guess that makes sense. We also have teasers of Starman training Courtney. I'm actually looking forward to this because I'm always down for some more cool effects and cool moves that Courtney could use. One thing I actually really like about Stargirl is that its fight scenes are really well done. Sometimes, you know, there's contrivances of the way they're filmed, but I'm talking about the cinematography of it. I've always been a big fan of. But then the next interesting thing in the promo is a conversation with the Shade and Starman, and this leads more to the fact that he's a suspect because the Shade says nobody wants you back, and then we see the Shade flying back with a blast from the cosmic staff. And then we see Courtney arrives on the scene saying stop. That doesn't necessarily add more to his motive or him being a suspect, because you could argue Starman would do that anyway. But again, I want to instill it in everyone's minds. The last time Sylvester saw the Shade was that battle at the JSA HQ. We saw at the very beginning of season 1, episode 1. We never saw actually him in his body mode, but we saw him snatch up Dr. Midnight. It's interesting to see what the Shade's gonna say as well, because it's interesting that he says nobody wants you here. What would make him say that? Like, surely Pat wants him there, Courtney wants him there, but maybe he's reading into the situation, guessing that Courtney's worried about him taking over. But I feel like there's a little bit more to that. Maybe the Shade's gonna tease a line of dialogue that says like, oh, I know something more about you, Sylvester, that nobody else knows. By the way, I'm gonna wrap the video up there, guys. I'm happy that we've got a weekly review now for Stargirl again. It feels good. We're kind of getting into review season again now. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for more discussions and breakdowns just like this, and news updates. We've got a lot of content that we do here, so I'd really appreciate a like as well, of course. Links, as always, are in the description down below. There's a join button and a super thanks button if you want to go that extra mile. But thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you members of the JSA in the next video. Goodbye.